The laughter at Michael's lavish wedding vanished the moment the helicopter arrived. It was loud, dark, and utterly out of place. Few knew the quiet woman at table 17 was why. This is a story of silence, service, and a truth that refused to be forgotten. It was a Sunday bathed in the kind of gold-draped opulence that made everything seem more significant than it truly was. At a wedding orchestrated like a corporate press release, all polished smiles and ostentatious toasts, Evelyn Black, 68, mother of the groom, sat alone at table 17. Tucked away by the buffet, half-shadowed and unnoticed, she was too polite to inquire why she hadn't been asked to say a few words. Her black suit, though impeccably pressed, was older than most of the guests' attire, and the small, faded purple heart ribbon pinned beneath her lapel seemed to draw more smirks than salutes from the surrounding crowd. Whispers had drifted over dinner, claiming she spoke of being some kind of covert operative, saving lives, but couldn't even produce a DD-214, the official military discharge document. By the time her son, Michael Hartley, a proud and polished tech executive, stood with his bride beneath the chandeliered arch, Evelyn's name hadn't been mentioned once. Not by the officiant, not in the meticulously curated slideshow, and certainly not during the best man's speech. The crowd erupted when Michael's new brother-in-law, a rising star in the tech world, raised his glass and declared, "Here's to Mike, first in the family to truly serve his country, if you count those defense contracts." Laughter rolled through the room like a sudden fog. Evelyn merely adjusted the edge of her sleeve, offering a faint smile, like someone who had endured far worse and emerged stronger. She never interrupted, never defended, just sat quietly with a glass of sparkling water and a plate of untouched cake. Even when the groom's new uncle, a successful tech entrepreneur with too many stories and too few boundaries, staggered over and asked, loud enough for the surrounding tables to hear, "Hey, Ms. Black, did you ever actually shoot anyone, or just handle paperwork?" Evelyn simply nodded once and replied, "Some missions don't make the headlines." More laughter followed, more knowing winks, more half-sincere pats on the shoulder, as if they were humoring a woman lost in her own tall tales. What they didn't know, what they never bothered to ask, was that Evelyn had spent over 2 decades deployed in black zones, assigned to units with no official patches, whose missions still appeared as denied operations in unredacted briefings. The single purple heart ribbon pinned to her jacket, the only one she was permitted to wear in public, had been quietly reissued to her just 2 months earlier under a new citation code. This came after a policy shift declassified parts of Operation Crimson Veil, an incident so deeply buried that even Congress never received a full briefing. Evelyn had turned down the official medal ceremony in D.C. because, in her own words, "I'd rather keep promises than collect applause." Still, the way people looked at her at the wedding, like an aging housekeeper who had snuck into the reception, would have stung anyone else. But Evelyn just watched, smiling faintly at Michael and his bride, even as they kept glancing toward her and then quickly away, as if her presence were an uncomfortable footnote in a story they were meticulously trying to rewrite. Years earlier, Evelyn had tried to share a few things with Michael when he turned 15, and again after he graduated college. But Michael had always brushed it off as, "Mom exaggerating again," too focused on his burgeoning ambition to hear the profound truth embedded in her silence. By the time he had built his career and meticulously crafted his public image, Evelyn had become a liability to the narrative he spun about himself, the mysterious veteran mother who never talked about her past. It eventually became easier to simply leave her out entirely. And so, on this day of solemn vows and blinding flashbulbs, Evelyn found herself seated next to a retired sergeant major turned ride-share driver and the mother of the groom's hairdresser. Her name was simply spelled out on a cheap, folded place card. While Michael's new father-in-law gave a booming toast about family legacy and service, he never once looked in Evelyn's direction. The DJ skipped over the mother-son dance, replacing it with a montage of childhood clips that ended with Michael's stepfather tying his tie in slow motion. Evelyn wasn't in a single frame. And still, Evelyn didn't utter a word. She sat with a grace no one deserved and a patience none of them had earned. She never corrected, never raised her voice, even when someone at the next table remarked, "Why would a real war hero be riding the bus to weddings?" And someone else added, if she was such a big deal, wouldn't the military have done something about it? Evelyn just sipped her sparkling water, smiled, and murmured, "Sometimes the real work ends with silence, not a salute." By the time dessert arrived, the speeches concluded, and Michael posed beside a groom's cake adorned with an ice sculpture that cost more than Evelyn's car. The quiet woman at the back of the room buttoned her suit jacket. She reached into her coat for a small, square envelope, addressed to Michael in her own careful handwriting. She began to walk out into the night, leaving behind the cacophony of celebration and shattered glass, stepping softly down the gravel path alone. Then, the wind shifted, the air stirred, and a sound not found on any wedding playlist began to grow louder from above. It was the unmistakable, low, steady thrum of rotor blades. The deep, rhythmic thrum of rotor blades cut through the wedding chatter, drawing every eye skyward as a matte black, stealth Blackhawk helicopter descended deliberately onto the meticulously manicured lawn beyond the reception tent. Its unmarked body cast a silent, imposing shadow over the guests, who paused, phones raised, bewildered by what they were witnessing. Out stepped 4 men in impeccably tailored dress uniforms, their creases sharpened, their medals gleaming. They were led by a former Delta Force commander with a presence that commanded immediate, unspoken respect. Their purposeful, synchronized march brought the entire crowd to an uneasy hush. The commander halted at the edge of the tent, his gaze fixed on Evelyn Black, who stood frozen, clutching the envelope she had intended to leave behind. With a commanding hand gesture, he spoke, his voice cutting through the silence, "Ms. Black, you are not dismissed." Whispers rippled through the stunned crowd as 2 of the men carefully carried a sealed shadow box, placing it with deliberate precision on the head table, precisely where Evelyn should have been seated all evening. The commander then pulled a faded black and white photo from his folder. It depicted a younger Evelyn in winter gear, flanked by a covert team in front of a heavily armed helicopter. Operation Crimson Veil was faintly written beneath the image. He spoke without needing a microphone, his voice resonating with authority. This woman's silence was mistaken for fiction for far too long. A recording then played, an official, authoritative female voice declaring declassified mission details, success. 0 casualties. Hundreds of lives saved. Decorations withheld under strict secrecy. The crowd's disbelief deepened into stunned silence as the commander turned his piercing gaze to Michael. "Your mother led a mission no one knew about. You never asked, and she never needed to tell." Evelyn's past, once dismissed as a fantasy, now stood undeniable before everyone. And as the commander opened the shadow box to reveal a rare, official medal and signed citations from 3 U.S. presidents, the room transformed from skepticism to solemn, profound respect. One by one, guests, including former ROTC friends and unseen veterans Evelyn had served with, rose and saluted silently, honoring a woman whose quiet heroism outshone every toast and every round of applause from the evening. The commander concluded, "We brought the ceremony here because your son deserves to know the woman who raised him." The DJ's music faded completely. The room filled only with the immense weight of truth, and as Evelyn stood quietly at last, the wind whispered through the tents, carrying a long overdue reckoning. Evelyn Black didn't rush to the microphone. In fact, she didn't move at all at first, just stood there under the tent lights with her hands clasped behind her back and her shoulders squared. Not to impress, but because that posture had been trained into her, the way silence had been deliberately, permanently ingrained. The wedding crowd stood frozen, half in awe, half in profound shame, waiting to see if the woman they'd all ignored would speak. And after a long, measured breath, she did. But not from the stage, not with a mic. Just from the center of the room, in a voice so steady and soft that somehow, everyone leaned in to hear it. "I didn't come here to make a scene," she said, her gaze sweeping across the faces, briefly lingering on Michael. "I came here because I love my son. That's it. I never needed a spotlight." Her eyes flicked once, just once, toward Michael, who now stood silent beside his bride, pale and blinking like a man who'd just been introduced to his own mother for the very first time. "But I've spent most of my life watching people celebrate the loudest person in the room," Evelyn continued, her voice gaining a subtle, almost imperceptible strength, and thinking the quiet ones didn't matter. I kept quiet, not because I had nothing to say, but because what I did wasn't supposed to be talked about. You could hear a pin drop. The silence was absolute. My missions weren't on the news. They didn't come with headlines, but they kept people alive who never knew my name. A ripple of profound discomfort moved through the guests, like the air itself was adjusting to a new, heavier truth. Michael took a hesitant step forward, his voice breaking with a mixture of confusion and burgeoning regret. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Evelyn looked at him, not with judgment, but with something far heavier, a tired, deep affection that spanned decades of unspoken love. "Because you were never supposed to carry it," she said. "You were my future, not my past." The commander at the front stepped forward now, adding his voice to the quiet reverence. "Your mother led Operation Crimson Veil, one of the highest-risk evacuations ever pulled off in a hostile zone. No one died. No one talks about it because she followed orders and buried her legacy in silence. Until tonight." Someone near the cake table let out a stunned, shaky breath. The successful tech entrepreneur who had scoffed at Evelyn earlier sat down slowly, his face now a mask of mortification. Evelyn stepped to the head table, her fingers tracing the edge of the shadow box once, as if acknowledging a long-dormant part of herself. Then she turned back to the guests. "I didn't want to meddle. I wanted to be here. I wanted to sit at my son's wedding, maybe dance a little, and be proud. That's all." Michael, his eyes now full of tears, walked forward and embraced her. He really embraced her, tightly, truly, and whispered something none of them heard, something that made Evelyn's hands twitch before finally wrapping around his back, like the closing of a circle that had taken decades to complete. When they pulled apart, Evelyn smiled faintly. "Play my husband's favorite song," she said softly to the DJ, referencing Michael's late father. "If you have it." The DJ, still speechless, nodded numbly and found the track, Unforgettable, by Nat King Cole. Evelyn turned not to her son, but to the bride, extending her hand. Together, the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law danced, slowly, gracefully, reverently, while the guests stepped back, watching a woman they'd so profoundly misjudged move through the room like she had always belonged at its very center. No one filmed it. No one dared speak. And when the music faded, the only sound was quiet tears and a single, resonant clink of a wine glass, as one guest, an active-duty soldier, stood and saluted. Others followed. Not a word, just honor. Evelyn turned to Michael one last time, handing him the sealed envelope she had tried to leave hours earlier. "Open it when you need to know who you are," she said simply. Then, she walked out, not as a forgotten mother, but as a woman finally seen, finally acknowledged. The stealth Blackhawk helicopter lifted slowly behind her, a silent, powerful escort in a sky that no longer ignored her. By morning, no one remembered the cake flavor or the groom's grand entrance or the $8,000 string quartet. They remembered a photo snapped quietly near the dessert table of Evelyn Black standing tall beside her son, the shadow box tucked under one arm, with the caption, "Turns out the quiet woman in the back saved more lives than anyone in the room. We just never asked." Weeks later, in Michael's sleek, modern office, above the framed photo and the now-displayed shadow box, hung a single quote from Evelyn's old field notes, edged in polished brass: "The loudest voice isn't always the one that led us." This story, like so many others, serves as a poignant reminder that true heroism often operates in the shadows, its impact echoing silently through the lives it touches. Evelyn Black's journey, marked by decades of quiet sacrifice and unyielding dedication, challenges us to look beyond the surface, to question the narratives we're presented with, and to seek out the unspoken truths that shape our world. Her story underscores the profound dignity found in silent service and the enduring power of a legacy built not on applause, but on unwavering integrity. It's a powerful lesson in respect, respect for those who serve, respect for the untold stories, and respect for the quiet strength that defines genuine heroes. The very act of asking, of truly listening, can unlock a universe of courage and sacrifice that might otherwise remain hidden. It forces us to confront our own biases and assumptions, reminding us that judgment based on superficial appearances can blind us to the most extraordinary acts of valor. Evelyn's quiet strength in the face of mockery and her ultimate, dignified reveal reverberated far beyond the wedding hall. Her story became a viral sensation, sparking conversations across social media platforms, news outlets, and even military forums. Veterans organizations shared it widely, highlighting the often unseen sacrifices of those in Black Ops. It led to a renewed appreciation for hidden heroes and prompted many to reach out to elderly veterans in their own communities, seeking to hear their stories, to offer the respect they had long been due. The hashtag Quiet Heroes gained traction, with people sharing anecdotes of unassuming individuals whose lives were filled with silent acts of bravery and kindness. Michael, now forever changed by the revelation, became a vocal advocate for veterans affairs. He used his platform as a tech executive to champion initiatives that supported the mental health and recognition of covert operatives. He understood now, with a clarity that both humbled and inspired him, that true service isn't about accolades or public displays, but about the unwavering commitment to a cause greater than oneself. His mother's story became a beacon, illuminating the quiet corners where real heroes reside, often unrecognized, until truth, like a powerful Blackhawk, descends and demands to be seen. If Evelyn Black's quiet courage resonated with you, please comment "Respect" below. Share this story to honor the unsung heroes among us, and subscribe for more tales that prove silence can indeed be louder than any speech.